She never saw his face, but she gave him her heart. On Facebook, she built a love without knowing who she loved. She confused the man and kissed a millionaire. That mistake changed everyone's fate that night. Marina had always known the world had colors, even without ever having seen them. Her mother used to say that yellow was warm like the afternoon sun, that blue was cool like the breeze that came through the kitchen window, and that red was as intense as the love she felt for her. But Marina grew up without these visual references, and over time, she learned that the world could be felt in other ways. The smell of brewed coffee early in the morning, the sound of buses passing on the avenue, the rough texture of concrete under her bare feet as a child. All of this formed her universe, a universe made of sensations that no one else seemed to value. She lived in Chicago on the South Side, in a working-class neighborhood where the houses were squeezed together as if competing for space to exist. The streets were full of potholes, the walls covered in graffiti, and the constant noise of motorcycles and old cars composed the daily soundtrack. Marina knew every corner of that place, every uneven step, every crooked lamppost. She was 27 and lived alone in a small apartment she had inherited from her mother, who had passed away 3 years ago. Loneliness had settled into that space with her, like an invisible tenant who never paid rent. She worked as a cleaner, or rather, she tried to work. The jobs were always temporary, a week here, 2 days there. People hired her with good intentions, but soon realized that having a blind employee required patience, adaptation, and few were willing to provide it. Marina would listen to the excuses, always kind, always careful. It wasn't her fault, they'd say. It was just that they needed someone faster, someone who could see the corners better. Someone different. She would thank them, bury the hurt deep in her chest and move on, because that's what she knew how to do. Move on, even when the path was dark. The nights were the worst. When the street noise subsided and silence crept in through the window, Marina felt the weight of loneliness in a way no words could describe. It was as if the world had forgotten she existed. No one called, no one texted, no one knocked on the door. She ate dinner alone, listened to the radio alone, slept alone. And when she woke up, it all started over. The cycle of invisibility. It was on one of those nights, while navigating her phone with the screen reader activated, that Marina decided to do something different, something she had never done before. She joined a social media app. She didn't know what to expect. Maybe nothing. Maybe just another way to pass the time. But something inside her, a faint spark of hope, whispered that maybe, just maybe, there was someone on the other side of that screen willing to truly see her. She created a simple profile. Name, age, city. She didn't post a photo. She didn't know how to take one, and frankly, she didn't think it mattered. In her description, she wrote just one sentence: "I like music, sincere conversations, and feeling like I exist." It was the most honest she could be. For the first few days, nothing happened. Marina checked the app in the morning, in the afternoon, at night. No messages, no likes, no sign that anyone had noticed her presence. She began to regret it. Maybe the digital world was just as exclusionary as the real one, maybe even more so. After all, everyone there had a perfect image, an edited life, a manufactured smile. And her? She was just a faceless voice, an invisible presence among millions. But then, on a rainy Wednesday, as she listened to the sound of water hitting the window pane, a notification chimed on her phone. Someone had sent a message. Marina felt her heart race. Her hands trembled slightly as she activated the screen reader. The app's robotic voice read, "New message from Gabriel. Hello, Marina. I saw your profile and thought your description was beautiful. Do you really like music? What's your style?" Marina reread the message 3 times just to be sure it was real. Gabriel. The name echoed in her mind like a melody. She took a deep breath and began to type, slowly, choosing each word with care. "Hello, Gabriel. Thanks for the message. Yes, I love music. Any kind, really. But I have a special fondness for folk music, those old songs that seem to tell the stories of entire lives. What about you?" The reply came quickly, faster than she expected. I like folk music too. Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, Nina Simone. I think music has the power to say what words alone can't. Do you play an instrument? Marina smiled. It had been a long time since she had smiled like that, for real. I don't play anything, but I sing. Alone, of course. No one's ever heard me. I think I sing more for myself than for anyone else. The conversation flowed naturally, as if they had known each other for years. Gabriel asked questions, but not the obvious ones everyone else asked. He didn't ask about her blindness, didn't ask for explanations, didn't show pity. He asked about her dreams, her fears, what made her happy, and Marina, for the first time in a long time, felt seen, not by eyes but by something much deeper. In the following days, the messages became a routine. Gabriel would write in the morning, wishing her a good day. He'd write in the afternoon, asking how her day had been. He'd write at night, sharing thoughts, memories, small fragments of a life he never fully revealed. Marina knew nothing about him. She didn't know where he lived, what he did, if he had a family. And strangely, it didn't matter. What mattered was the connection, the feeling that someone was finally listening to her. He sent her a song, Tangled Up in Blue by Bob Dylan. Marina listened, moved. Then he sent another, A Case of You by Joni Mitchell. She cried, not from sadness, but from something she couldn't name. It was as if each song was a piece of him he was sharing, an invisible but real gift. Marina began to wait for the messages with an anxiety she hadn't felt in years. She would wake up, and the first thing she did was check her phone. Gabriel was always there. "Good morning, Marina. I hope you dreamed of beautiful things," she would reply. She would, with a racing heart, choosing words that expressed what she felt without revealing too much. "Good morning, Gabriel. I dreamed I was in a place where loneliness didn't exist. It was nice while it lasted." His reply came laden with a melancholy that Marina felt through the screen. "I know all about loneliness, Marina. Sometimes I think it's the only constant companion I have." Marina wanted to ask more, but something in the way he wrote made her understand that there were pains he wasn't ready to share yet. And that was okay. She had hers too. The weeks passed, and the connection between them deepened. Gabriel told her about sleepless nights, about the feeling of living a life that didn't seem his own, about the difficulty of trusting people. Marina shared about her invisibility, about the frustration of being treated as incapable, about the fear of never being truly loved. They understood each other in a language few spoke, the language of shared loneliness. One Friday night, Marina was lying in bed when her phone chimed. It was Gabriel. "Marina, can I tell you something that might be strange?" "Of course, Gabriel, you can tell me anything. I think I'm starting to feel something for you. I don't know if it's right to say this, I don't know if it's too soon, but I feel like you understand me in a way no one else does. And that's rare. Very rare." Marina felt her eyes burn. Tears streamed down her face without permission. She typed with trembling hands. "I feel it too, Gabriel, and I'm scared that this is just an illusion, scared that you'll disappear." "I won't disappear, Marina, I promise." But promises, Marina knew, were fragile. They could be broken as easily as they were made. Meanwhile, Marina's real life continued its arid course. She kept looking for work, kept being let go, kept coming home with empty hands and a heavy heart. Until one day, she received a call. It was from an employment agency. They had a cleaning position in a mansion in Lincoln Park. A permanent job with benefits, good pay. Marina could hardly believe it. "Are there any details I need to know?" she asked, suspicious. There were always details. The woman on the other end of the line hesitated before answering. "The owner of the house is very private. He doesn't like interaction. The housekeeper will give you all the rules on your first day, but it's a good job, Marina. Few people last there, but if you follow the rules, you'll do well." Marina accepted. She needed that job. She needed stability, a salary that would let her pay the bills without stress. And if the price was silence, she would pay it. After all, she was used to going unnoticed. The following Sunday, Marina took 2 buses and an L train to get to the Lincoln Park neighborhood. She had never been to that area, she could tell, by the sound of the streets that it was different, quieter, cleaner. Even the air seemed lighter. A private driver, sent from the house, picked her up at the L station and took her to the mansion. When Marina got out of the car, she felt the immensity of the place. She couldn't see it, but the way the sound carried indicated wide spaces, high ceilings, extensive gardens. It was another world, a world far from her own. The housekeeper, Mrs. Celia, met her at the door. She was a woman with a firm voice but not harsh. There was a certain sternness to her, but also something maternal. "Marina, welcome. I'll show you the house and explain the rules. Pay attention, because I won't repeat myself." Marina nodded, holding her cane tightly. The house was immense. Mrs. Celia guided her through wide hallways, enormous rooms, bedrooms that seemed to have never been used. She explained where the cleaning supplies were, which areas needed more attention, which rooms were off-limits. And the most important rule, Marina: the man of the house does not like to be disturbed. You are not to speak to him. You are not to make unnecessary noise. You are not to ask questions. He is a very busy and very private man, understood? Marina understood. Once again she would be invisible, but this time she was being paid for it. For the first few days, Marina followed the rules to the letter. She cleaned in silence, avoided the times she knew the owner would be around, kept her head down. She never saw him, not once, but she knew he was there. She felt his presence, like a shadow moving through the halls without ever revealing itself. At night, when she returned home, Marina found refuge in Gabriel's messages. He remained the only light in her exhausting routine. She told him about the new job, about the silent mansion, about the strange feeling of being in a place so large and yet so empty. "It feels like a mausoleum," she wrote one night. "Maybe it is," Gabriel replied. "Sometimes people build walls so high to protect themselves that they end up imprisoning themselves." Marina didn't know it, but as she typed those words, Gabriel was on the other side of the city, sitting in the living room of his own mansion, looking at his phone screen, with an expression that mixed guilt and desire. Because Gabriel was not who he said he was. Gabriel was just a name, an identity created on a desperate night when the loneliness had become too unbearable. The man behind the profile was Henry Almeida, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country, owner of one of the largest construction firms in the United States, heir to a family empire, and completely broken inside. Henry was 38, and for 5 years he had been living like a ghost. He had lost his fiancée, Amanda, in a car accident. She was coming back from a wedding reception when a drunk driver swerved into her lane. Henry wasn't in the car. He had stayed home, too tired to go out, and ever since, he had carried the guilt like a chain locked around his chest. If he had gone with her, maybe he could have convinced her not to drive. Maybe he could have saved her life. Maybe. After the accident, Henry withdrew from everyone and everything. He sold the apartment he shared with Amanda, bought the mansion in Lincoln Park, and locked himself inside. He ran the company from home, avoided social events, declined dinners, interviews, anything that forced him to interact. People said he had gone mad with grief. Maybe they were right. It was during a sleepless night, while aimlessly browsing the internet, that Henry created the fake profile. He had no intention of using it. It was just a way to feel connected, even if it was fake. But then he saw Marina's profile. He read her description. "I like music, sincere conversations, and feeling like I exist." And something inside him broke, or was fixed, he wasn't sure. He sent the first message without much thought, and when she replied, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: curiosity, a desire to continue. And slowly, without realizing it, he found himself waiting for her replies with the same anxiety as a teenager in love. Marina didn't know who he was, and Henry clung to that like a drowning man to a piece of wood. With her, he didn't have to be the billionaire. He didn't have to carry the weight of his last name, his fortune, the expectations. He could just be Gabriel, an ordinary man, a man who could still feel. But then Marina started, working at his house. And Henry panicked. She was there, just a few feet away, cleaning the same hallways he walked, breathing the same air. and she had no idea. Henry began to avoid her even more. He would lock himself in his office, only coming out when he was sure she had already left. But at the same time, he felt a painful need to see her, to understand who this woman was who had changed something inside him without knowing it. One night, while Marina was cleaning the upstairs, Henry forgot she was there. He had had more to drink than he should have. The anniversary of Amanda's death always destroyed him, and that year was no different. He locked himself in his office with a bottle of whiskey and let the pain out. He talked to himself, as he always did on those nights. He asked Amanda for forgiveness. He said he missed her. He said he was tired of living like a dead man. Marina heard everything. She was on the other side of the door, paralyzed. The man's voice was desperate, filled with an anguish she knew well. It was the voice of someone broken. And for some reason, that voice sounded strangely familiar. When the door opened and Henry came out, he found her there, standing still, with the expression of someone who had heard something she shouldn't have. For a second, they were silent. Henry thought about firing her, about pretending nothing had happened. But then Marina spoke. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to listen, but I did. And I just want you to know that you don't have to apologize to me. I understand. I understand pain." Henry looked at her, really looked, and saw something he didn't expect. Compassion. Not pity. Compassion. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel judged. In the days that followed, something changed between them. Henry started to appear more often. Sometimes he would sit in the living room while Marina cleaned. They didn't talk much. Just a few exchanged words, kind, careful. Mrs. Celia watched it all with an expression of someone who knew more than she should, but said nothing. Marina didn't know it, but meanwhile Gabriel kept sending messages. And she kept replying, torn between two worlds that, unbeknownst to her, were actually one and the same, and that's how it all began, with a lie, with two broken hearts, and with the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still room for something real. The weeks that followed were the most confusing of Marina's life. During the day, she cleaned the silent mansion, exchanging small words with the man who inhabited it. A man with a deep voice, a melancholic presence, who never revealed his name and whom she had taken to calling only Sir, as Mrs. Celia had taught her. At night, she would return to her apartment on the south side and dive into conversations with Gabriel, the virtual man who had become her reason to smile. Two men, two worlds, and Marina divided between them, not knowing they were the same person. Henry, for his part, lived in constant torment. Every message he sent to Marina through the fake profile was a stab to his own conscience. Every time he saw her in the mansion, carefully cleaning the furniture, softly humming songs he had sent her via his phone, he felt the weight of the lie grow. But at the same time, he couldn't stop. Because for the first time in 5 years, he felt alive. And that was as terrifying as it was addictive. One Thursday afternoon, Marina was cleaning the library when Henry walked in. She sensed his presence before she even heard him. There was something in the way the air moved when he was near. "Sorry to bother you," he said, his voice still tinged with that sadness that seemed to never leave him. "I just came to get a book." Marina stopped what she was doing and turned toward his voice. "You're not bothering me. It's your house." Henry took a book from the shelf but didn't leave. He stood there watching her. Marina couldn't see him, but she felt his gaze on her. It was strange, not uncomfortable, but strange. "Do you like to read?" he asked, breaking the silence. Marina smiled, a small but genuine smile. "I like audiobooks. It's not the same, I know, but it's what I have." Henry felt something tighten in his chest. He remembered his conversations with her through the fake profile. She had mentioned she liked stories, old novels, poetry. He had even sent her some recommendations. "What's your favorite?" Marina thought for a moment. 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. There's a passage that has always stuck with me. It's when the character realizes he's spent his whole life waiting for something that would never come. And I think a lot of people live like that. Waiting. Always waiting. Henry swallowed hard. Those words were a sharp blade piercing his soul, because he knew exactly what she was talking about. He had also lived his life waiting, waiting for the pain to pass, waiting for Amanda to come back, waiting for life to make sense again. "That's a beautiful choice," he said, his voice almost a whisper. Marina turned to continue cleaning, but before she could, Henry spoke again. "Do you sing?" Marina stopped, surprised. How did he know that? "How do you know I sing?" Henry realized his mistake. He panicked for a second, but quickly composed himself. "I hear you sometimes when I'm in my office. You sing softly while you work. You have a beautiful voice." Marina felt her face grow warm. No one had ever complimented her voice. No one had ever really paid attention. "Thank you," she murmured, not knowing what else to say. Henry left the library with the book in his hand and his heart in pieces. It was getting harder and harder to maintain the charade, more and more painful to be near her, knowing she didn't know who he really was. That night, Marina received a message from Gabriel. "Marina, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Gabriel, you can. Have you ever been in love?" Marina felt her heart skip a beat. The question was direct, almost brutal in its honesty. She took a deep breath before replying. "Once. A long time ago. But it didn't work out. He couldn't see past the blindness. I was always the poor little girl, the girl who needed help. I was never the woman he desired. What about you? Have you ever been in love?" Gabriel's reply took a while to come. When it did, it was filled with a pain that Marina felt through the screen. "Yes. Deeply. And I lost her. Not by choice, but due to circumstances beyond my control. And since then, I haven't been able to let myself feel again. I'm afraid that everything I touch will break." Marina felt her eyes burn. There was a sincerity in those words that shook her. She typed slowly, choosing each word with care. "I understand your fear, Gabriel, but I think living in fear of breaking is the same as already being broken. And maybe we need to let ourselves feel, even if it hurts, because the pain, at least, proves that we're still alive." Henry read those words locked in his mansion's office, a half-empty bottle of whiskey beside his computer. And for the first time since losing Amanda, he cried, truly cried. Not silent tears of grief, but loud, painful, liberating sobs. He cried for the fiancée he had lost. He cried for the years he had wasted hiding. And he cried for the woman who was, without knowing it, saving him. Mrs. Celia heard the crying through the closed office door. She didn't go in. She knew there were pains that needed to be felt alone. But the next day, when Marina arrived for work, the housekeeper called her for a chat. "Marina, sit with me for a moment." Marina obliged, sitting in a kitchen chair while Mrs. Celia made coffee. "You've noticed he's different, haven't you?" Marina hesitated before answering. "Yes, he seems less sad or maybe just less lost." Mrs. Celia served the coffee and placed the cup in Marina's hand carefully. "He lost someone a few years ago, a very important person, and since then he's lived as if he's also lost the will to go on. But since you arrived, something has changed. He leaves his office, he talks. He even smiles sometimes, and I just wanted you to know that even without realizing it, you're making a difference." Marina held the cup with both hands, feeling the warmth seep through the porcelain. "I'm not doing anything special, I'm just here. And sometimes that's all people need, someone to be here." Marina thought about those words all day. She thought about Gabriel, about the man in the mansion, about how they both seemed to carry similar pains, and for a moment she wished she could bring them together, to make the virtual man and the real man become one, because separately they were both incomplete. The following week, Henry did something he hadn't done in years. He prepared the house to receive someone, not a formal visit, not a business dinner, but a moment just for him and Marina. He asked Mrs. Celia to prepare a special tea, the kind Marina had mentioned she liked in her messages as Gabriel. He arranged the living room with comfortable cushions. He put on ambient music, and he waited. When Marina arrived that evening for the night shift she sometimes worked, Henry met her at the entrance. "Marina, could you come to the living room for a moment? I'd like to talk to you." Marina felt her heart race. There was something different in his voice, something lighter, more hopeful. Of course. Henry guided her to the living room, holding her arm gently. Marina felt his hand on hers, and a shiver ran up her spine. It was the first time he had truly touched her. When they sat down, Henry served the tea. Marina recognized the scent immediately. It was the chamomile and honey tea she had told Gabriel she loved in a conversation. "How did you know I like this tea?" she asked, her voice full of surprise. Henry froze. Another mistake. Another crack in the lie. "Mrs. Celia told me," he lied, his voice almost failing. "She said you had mentioned it." Marina accepted the explanation, but something inside her began to stir. A doubt. A strange feeling that something didn't add up. They talked for hours. Henry spoke about the company, about the pressure of carrying on a family legacy, about the loneliness that came with success. Marina spoke about the difficulty of being seen in a world that values appearance so much, about the jobs she had lost, about the feeling of always being the last choice. And the more they talked, the more Henry felt the lie becoming unsustainable. At one point, Marina started humming a song. It was A Case of You by Johnny Mitchell, the same one Gabriel had sent her weeks ago. Henry felt his heart pound. He excused himself, went to his office and recorded it. He recorded her voice filling that empty house with life. He recorded it because he wanted to remember, because he needed to remember that there was beauty in the world, even amidst the pain. When he returned to the living room, Marina had stopped singing. She was sitting quietly, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Are you okay?" Henry asked. Marina nodded, but there was something in the way she held her teacup that indicated no, she was not okay. She was confused, because the more time she spent with this man, the more familiar he seemed. The way he chose his words, the melancholy in his voice, the careful kindness. It all reminded her of Gabriel. But it was impossible. Gabriel was just an ordinary man, someone on the other side of the screen who had never revealed details about his life. And the man in the mansion was clearly rich, powerful, the owner of a life Marina could never reach. In the following days, the nightly conversations became a routine. Henry always found an excuse to call Marina to the living room. He'd say he needed company, that the house was too big for one person, that he liked hearing her voice. And Marina, without knowing why, always accepted, because there was something about that man that drew her in, something that went beyond his voice, beyond his words. It was a connection she couldn't explain. Gabriel, meanwhile, continued to send messages, but there was a subtle change in them. Henry was running out of excuses to keep up the lie. Every time Marina shared something that had happened during her day, he had to feign surprise, feign interest, pretend he didn't know exactly what she was talking about, because he had been there. And then on a rainy Tuesday, Henry made a decision. He couldn't go on like this. He couldn't live divided between two identities. He couldn't keep lying to the only person who had managed to make him feel something real. He had to end it, one way or another. He created a new email, an anonymous one, and through Gabriel's profile, he wrote a message he knew would destroy her. "Marina, I need to tell you something. And it's going to be hard for you to hear. I have to go away. I can't continue this conversation, not because I don't care, but because I care too much and I'm scared of what that means. You deserve someone who can be truly present, someone who doesn't hide behind a screen. And I can't be that person. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for giving you hope. I'm sorry for making you believe there was something here. But I have to leave. And I need you to move on. Because you deserve to be happy, even if it's not with me." Henry sent the message and closed the account, deleted the profile, severed the only thread that still tied him to that lie, and then he sat on his office floor and let the guilt consume him. Marina read the message 3 times. 4, 5. She couldn't believe it. Gabriel was leaving. The only man who had made her feel seen, desired, loved, was leaving. And she didn't understand why. She didn't understand what she had done wrong. She didn't understand how something that seemed so real could disappear so quickly. She cried for hours, cried until she had no tears left, and when the crying stopped, she felt something worse, then sadness, She felt the emptiness she had lived with for years before meeting Gabriel, the emptiness she had forgotten existed. She deactivated her social media account. She didn't want anything more to do with virtual connections. She didn't want to believe in invisible promises anymore. She just wanted to go back to being who she was before, the invisible girl who went unnoticed, because at least that way it didn't hurt so much. But life has a cruel way of not letting you give up so easily. The next day, when Marina arrived to work at the mansion, Henry was waiting for her in the living room. His eyes were red, his appearance disheveled, and for the first time, Marina noticed just how broken he looked. "Marina, sit down, please." She obeyed, the man's voice carrying an urgency that frightened her. "Did something happen?" Henry took a deep breath. He wanted to tell her the truth. He wanted to say who he really was, what he had done, why he had lied. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he said something different. "I'd like to make you a proposition. I know you live far away. I know the commute is tiring. What if you came and stayed here some nights? There are plenty of spare rooms. You could rest better, wake up later. It would be more comfortable for you." Marina was silent. The offer was generous, but there was something strange about it, something that didn't make sense. "Why are you doing this?" Henry hesitated, and then, for the first time, he said something that was pure truth. "Because the house is less empty when you're here." Marina felt something break inside her, or maybe it was mending, she wasn't sure, but she accepted. She accepted because she needed something to keep her from falling apart. She accepted because somehow this sad man in the silent mansion had become important to her. And so Marina began to spend her nights at the mansion. She slept in a room on the second floor, woke up to the smell of coffee Mrs. Celia prepared, cleaned the house during the day, and at night she would sit in the living room with Henry. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her stories about the company, about the challenges of leading an empire he hadn't chosen. She told him about her childhood, about the mother she had lost, about the dreams she had tucked away because they seemed impossible to achieve. One night, as they were talking, Henry picked up the guitar that had been leaning in a corner of the room for years. Marina heard the sound of the strings being tuned. "You play?" "I used to. It's been a while since I've picked this up." "Play something for me." Henry hesitated, but then he began to play. It was a simple, melancholic tune, full of pauses that said more than the notes. Marina closed her eyes and let herself be carried away. And when he finished, there were tears on her face. "It's beautiful. What's it called?" "It doesn't have a name. I wrote it a long time ago, for someone who isn't here anymore." Marina understood. She didn't need explanations. She knew that song was a piece of his pain, a piece he had chosen to share with her. Henry put the guitar away and sat next to Marina on the sofa. They were silent for long minutes, just feeling each other's presence. And then, in an impulse he couldn't control, Henry took her hand. Marina felt the touch and didn't pull away. On the contrary, she intertwined her fingers with his, and there in that silence charged with meaning, something changed. It wasn't love yet, it wasn't certainty, but it was the beginning of something, a fragile but real spark. Mrs. Celia watched from a distance. She knew Henry was playing a dangerous game. She knew the truth would eventually come out, and when it did, it would be devastating. But she also saw something she hadn't seen in years. She saw hope. She saw life. And she silently hoped that somehow it would work out. Because sometimes people need a second chance, even when they don't deserve it, even when the truth is a time bomb waiting to explode. The days at the mansion began to fall into a routine Marina had never imagined she would have. She would wake up early, have coffee with Mrs. Celia in the spacious kitchen while they listened to the radio, and then start her work. But the work had ceased to be just work. It had become a way of inhabiting that space, of feeling a part of that place that had once seemed so distant from her reality. And Henry was always nearby, not in an invasive way, but present. Sometimes he would work in his office with the door open just to hear Marina humming as she arranged the furniture. Other times he would appear in the kitchen in the middle of the afternoon asking for coffee, just to exchange a few words with her. And every night, without fail, he would call her to the living room, to talk, to listen to music, to simply be. Marina felt something changing inside her. The pain over Gabriel's departure was still there, but it had begun to transform into something else. A melancholic acceptance, an understanding that some people come into our lives just to teach us that we are capable of feeling, and then they leave. And maybe that was Gabriel's role, to teach her that she deserved to be loved. And now there was this man, the man of the silent mansion who never revealed his full name, but who was slowly revealing his soul. Marina didn't fully understand what she felt for him. It was different from what she had felt for Gabriel. With Gabriel, everything was light, virtual, safe. With this man, everything was intense, real, frightening, because here there were no screens to hide behind. Here it was her and him, in all their imperfect humanity. One Friday night, after a particularly difficult week where Henry had had problems at the company, he came home later than usual. Marina was in the living room listening to music on her phone through her headphones. She didn't hear him arrive. Henry stopped at the doorway and watched her. She was gently nodding her head to the rhythm of the music, her lips moving silently along with the lyrics. There was something so pure in that scene that Henry felt his chest tighten. He approached slowly and touched her shoulder lightly. Marina took off her headphones, startled. "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you." "It's okay. I didn't hear you come in. How was your day?" Henry sat down next to her on the sofa, letting out a tired sigh. "Difficult. Sometimes I feel like I carry the weight of decisions that aren't always mine. The company was founded by my grandfather, built by my father, and I inherited all of it without choosing to. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I could have chosen a different path." Marina turned toward him, her expression thoughtful. "And what path would you have chosen?" Henry thought for a long moment before answering. "Maybe a musician or a teacher. Something simple. Something that didn't require me to be someone I'm not." Marina smiled, a sad but understanding smile. "I think everyone carries some kind of weight. I carry the weight of being invisible. You carry the weight of being seen too much. In the end, we both just want to be seen the right way, by the right person." Henry looked at her and felt something shift inside his chest, an almost uncontrollable urge to tell her the truth, to say that he was Gabriel, that it had been him all along, that he had first met her through a screen because he was too cowardly to take a risk in the real world. But the words wouldn't come, because he knew that if he told her, he would lose everything. He would lose her trust. He would lose the way she looked at him, as if he were just a man, not a billionaire, not a lie, just a man. Instead, he did something different, something he hadn't planned. He held her face between his hands, gently, as if she were made of something fragile. Marina felt his touch, and her heart raced. Neither of them moved. They stayed there, breathing the same air, feeling the tension grow between them like a rope being stretched to its limit. "May I?" Henry whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. Marina didn't trust her own voice to answer. She just nodded. And then, for the first time in years, Henry kissed someone. It wasn't a desperate or rushed kiss. It was slow, careful, filled with all the feelings he couldn't put into words. And Marina responded, feeling something inside her melt and rebuild itself at the same time. When they pulled away, they were both breathless. Marina brought a hand to her lips, still feeling his taste. Henry took her hand and brought it back, intertwining their fingers. "I don't know what I'm doing," he confessed. "It's been so long since I've felt anything like this that I've forgotten what it's like. But I know I don't want you to leave. I don't want this to be just another night." Marina felt her eyes burn. There was a brutal sincerity in those words that shook her. "I don't know what I'm doing either, but I know that when I'm near you, I feel like I finally exist. And that's all I've ever wanted." They held each other on the sofa for hours, just existing in each other's arms. Henry felt for the first time since losing Amanda that maybe there was room for something new. Not to replace what he had lost, but to build something different. Something that was just his and hers. Mrs. Celia, who had watched from a distance, went up to her own room with a heavy heart. She knew this wouldn't end well. She knew the truth would eventually come out, but she also knew it wasn't her place to interfere. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way. In the following weeks, Marina and Henry became inseparable. He took her to dinner at discreet restaurants where no one would recognize him. They walked through Chicago's parks in the late afternoons, him describing the colors of the sunset, while she imagined what it would be like to see that spectacle with her own eyes. They watched movies, at home, him narrating the scenes for her, and her laughing at the jokes he made up to fill the silences. Marina had forgotten Gabriel, or at least she had pushed his memory into a dark corner of her mind, because now she had something real. She had someone who held her, who kissed her, who told her she was important, and that was more than she had ever had. But Henry hadn't forgotten. He couldn't. The guilt ate at him from the inside like acid. Every kiss was a lie. Every declaration was built on a foundation of deceit. And he knew that eventually it would all come crashing down. He just didn't know when. One Saturday afternoon, Henry had to go to the office to handle an emergency. Marina stayed home, taking advantage of the rare moment of solitude to explore the mansion more calmly. She went up to the third floor, a place she rarely went. There was a locked room there. Mrs. Celia had once mentioned it was the master's old room, but that he no longer went in. Marina tried the doorknob. To her surprise, it was unlocked. She entered slowly, sensing the different atmosphere of the room. There was something frozen in time there. The smell was old, dusty. She walked carefully, her cane tapping softly on the floor until she bumped into something. It was a dresser. On top of it, her fingers found picture frames. She picked one up and felt it. It was heavy, made of ornate metal. Inside there was what felt like a photograph. Marina knew she would never see the image, but she held the frame carefully, as if holding something sacred. Who was in that photo? Why was this room locked? Why did the man she was beginning to love have so many secrets? Mrs. Celia appeared at the door, breathless. "Marina, you shouldn't be in here." Marina turned, startled. "I'm sorry. The door was open. I was just curious." Mrs. Celia entered the room and gently took the picture frame from Marina's hands. This was his and his fiancée's room. She passed away 5 years ago. He's never been able to come in here again. He keeps everything as it was on the day she left. Marina felt her heart ache. So that was it. The man she was falling for was still carrying the grief of a lost love. And her? What was she? A replacement? A way for him to forget? Or something real? "He truly loves you," Mrs. Celia said, as if reading Marina's thoughts. "I've known him for years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Not even her. It's different, it's deeper, because you saw him when he was broken, and you still stayed." Marina didn't know if she believed those words, but she wanted to. Desperately. That night, when Henry returned, Marina was quiet. He immediately noticed that something had changed. "What happened?" Marina took a deep breath before speaking. "I went into the room on the third floor. Mrs. Celia told me about your fiancé, about what happened." Henry's blood ran cold. For a moment, he thought she had discovered everything, but then he realized she only knew about Amanda, nothing about Gabriel, nothing about the lie that sustained everything. "I should have told you sooner," he said, sitting next to her, "but it's hard to talk about. It's a wound that never fully healed. Do you still love her?" The question was direct, almost brutal. Henry thought carefully before answering. "I will always love her. She was an important part of my life. But what I feel for you is different. It's not less. It's not an attempt to replace what I lost. It's something new, something I've never felt before. With her, I was who I thought I should be. With you, I'm who I really am." Marina felt tears stream down her face. She wanted to believe those words, but there was something that didn't add up. A strange feeling that there were more secrets hidden in that mansion. "What's your full name?" she asked suddenly. Henry froze. It was a simple question, but the answer could change everything. "Why do you want to know?" "Because we've been together for weeks, and I don't even know what you're really called. Everyone calls you Sir. Mrs. Celia never says your name. It's like you're a ghost." Henry knew he couldn't run anymore. He took a deep breath. "Henry, My name is Henry Almeida. Marina was silent, processing the information. The last name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. Almeida, like the development firm. Henry closed his eyes. This was it. The moment it all began to unravel. Yes, my family owns Almeida Development. I'm the CEO of the company. Marina felt the floor disappear from under her feet. Henry Almeida, the reclusive billionaire who ran one of the largest real estate empires in the country. The man who appeared in magazines, in newspapers, always in a suit and tie, always with a cold, distant expression. That man was the same one who kissed her every night? The same one who held her hand and said she made him feel alive? Why didn't you tell me? Her voice was low, almost a whisper. Because I wanted you to know me for who I am, not for how the world sees me, not as the heir, the businessman, the billionaire, just as Henry, an ordinary man trying to learn how to live again. Marina stood up from the sofa, needing space to process it all. There's nothing ordinary about you. There's nothing ordinary about this situation. I'm a blind cleaner from the South Side. You're one of the richest men in the country. We don't make sense. Yes, we do, Henry insisted, standing up as well. We do because what we feel is real. Because when we're together, none of that matters. Not the money, not the differences, not what the world thinks. Marina shook her head, feeling everything crumble inside her. You don't understand. For you, this is a choice. You can choose to ignore the differences because you have the privilege to do so. But for me, I will always be the poor girl who works in your house. I will always be the one who can't see the world the same way you do. And that will matter. Eventually, that will matter. Henry felt desperation take over. He was losing her. And it wasn't even over the worst of his lies. It was over something he couldn't change. Something that had always been there, but that they had chosen to ignore. Marina, please, don't do this. Don't throw away what we have because of something so superficial. Superficial. Her voice rose, filled with a cutting pain. You think the difference between us is superficial. Henry, you live in a world I can never reach, and I live in a world you'll never have to understand. How can this possibly work? Henry had no answer, because deep down he knew she was right, but he didn't want to admit it. He didn't want to lose the only thing that made him feel human. That night, Marina slept in one of the guest rooms. She locked the door and cried herself to sleep, and Henry stayed up in his office, drinking and hating himself for lying, hating himself for being who he was, hating himself for not being able to be just the man she needed. The next day, Marina woke up decided. She couldn't stay there any longer, not until she had clarity about what she really felt and what this relationship meant. She went down to the kitchen and found Mrs. Celia preparing breakfast. I'm going home for a few days. I need to think. Mrs. Celia nodded, but there was a sadness in her eyes. He's hurting, Marina. I'm not defending his choices, but he's hurting. So am I, Marina replied, her voice firm but filled with emotion. And I need to figure out if this pain is worth it. She gathered her things, called a cab, and left the mansion without saying goodbye to Henry. He watched from his office window, his heart breaking with every step she took toward the gate. Marina returned to her apartment on the south side, and everything seemed smaller, tighter, emptier than ever. She had gotten used to the wide spaces of the mansion, the comfortable silence, Henry's constant presence, and now she was back to her reality, to the loneliness she knew so well. Over the next few days, Henry tried calling several times. Marina didn't answer. He sent messages. She didn't reply. He tried to visit, but she wouldn't open the door. And slowly, Henry began to understand that he might have truly lost her. That's when he made a desperate decision. If he couldn't have her as Henry, maybe he could talk to her as Gabriel, just one more time, just to understand what she was feeling. He reactivated the old profile and sent a message. Marina, it's me. I know I was a coward. I know I ran when I should have stayed. But I need to know if you're okay. I need to know if you can ever forgive me. Marina saw the message on her phone, and the world stopped. Gabriel. He was back. After weeks, after she had rebuilt her life around someone else, he was back. And the worst part, A part of her was happy. A part of her still held a place for that virtual man who had been the first to make her feel like she existed. She didn't reply immediately. She stared at the message for hours, torn between anger and relief, between the past and the present, between two men who, unbeknownst to her, were the same person. And all the while, Henry waited on the other side of the screen, his heart in pieces, knowing he was playing his last card. The card that could either save him or destroy him completely. Because sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes the truth just reveals how trapped you were all along. Marina spent 3 days staring at that message. 3 days in which the world seemed suspended between two impossible realities. On one side, Henry Almeida, the billionaire who had kissed her, who had held her hand and promised she made him feel alive. On the other, Gabriel, the virtual man who had been the first to truly see her, who had disappeared without explanation and now returned asking for forgiveness. 2 men, 2 worlds, and Marina at the center of it all, trying to understand what her heart truly wanted. On the morning of the 4th day, as she drank coffee alone in her small apartment kitchen, Marina finally replied, "Gabriel, I don't know if I can forgive you. You made me believe there was someone who saw me beyond the blindness, beyond the invisibility, and then you vanished. You left a void that I spent weeks trying to fill. I met someone real, and now you come back and everything is confusing again. What do you want from me?" Henry read the message sitting in his mansion office with deep, dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't slept properly since Marina had left. The guilt was consuming him like a slow fire. She had met someone. Of course she had. And that someone was him. The irony was so cruel, it was almost comical. Almost. He typed his response with trembling hands. "I want to know if there's still a chance for us. I know I don't deserve it. I know I was a coward. But I can't stop thinking about you. I can't accept that I threw away the only real connection I've had in years. Marina, I know about the someone you met, and if he makes you happy, I'll respect that. I'll disappear again, this time for good. But if there's still a part of you that holds something for me, please, tell me. Because I need to know if I still have a chance to fix what I destroyed." Marina read those words and felt her chest tighten. How was it possible to feel something for 2 people at the same time? How was it possible to be angry with someone and still miss them? It took her hours to reply, weighing each word. "Gabriel, what I felt for you was real. But it was based on conversations, on messages, on a version of you I could never touch. With him, it's different, it's tangible. It's scary because it's too real, but it's also complicated. There are differences between us that seem impossible to overcome. So I don't know. I don't know what I feel. I don't know what I want. I just know I'm tired of feeling torn." Henry read that message and made the most reckless decision of his life. He needed to see her. He needed to be near her, even if it was for the last time. But not as Henry. Not yet. As Gabriel. He needed her to choose between them, even if that choice was a sham. Because only then would he know if what she felt for him as Henry was strong enough to survive the truth. "Marina, can I see you? In person? I know it's strange after so long. I know you might say no, but I need to look you in the eyes and tell you everything I couldn't say before. Please." Marina felt her heart race. Gabriel wanted to see her. After months of talking only, through screens he wanted a real meeting. Part of her screamed no, that it was a terrible idea, that she had been hurt enough. But another part, the part that still remembered the first butterflies he had caused, desperately wanted to say yes. "Where?" she typed, before she could change her mind. Henry suggested a small, discreet coffee shop in Chinatown, a neutral place where he knew he wouldn't be recognized. They set it for the following Saturday, at 3 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, Henry devised a desperate plan. He would ask a friend to go in his place, meet Marina, and explain that Gabriel had a last-minute emergency. It would be the perfect excuse to disappear again, to clear the way for her to return to him as Henry. Was it manipulation? Yes. Was it cruel? Also yes. But Henry was desperate, and desperate men make terrible choices. Saturday arrived grey and cold. Marina woke up with a knot in her stomach. She changed her clothes 3 times before finally settling on a simple burgundy dress her mother had given her years ago. She put her hair up, applied some lipstick and grabbed her cane. She called a rideshare. That took her to the coffee shop. When she entered the establishment, the smell of fresh coffee enveloped her. She asked the barista for help finding a table near the window. She sat down, her heart beating so loudly she was sure everyone around could hear it. 3:15, 3:30, 3:45. Gabriel didn't show up. Marina felt disappointment grow in her chest like a poisonous weed. Of course he wouldn't come. Of course it was all a lie. She picked up her cane, ready to leave, when she heard hurried footsteps approaching. "Marina!" She froze. She knew that voice. But it wasn't the voice she was expecting. It was another one she knew as well as her own breath. "Henry?" He sat down in the chair across from her, out of breath, as if he had run all the way there. "I can explain." Marina felt confusion take over. What was Henry doing here? How did he know she would be at this place? "Explain what? How did you know I was here?" Henry took a deep breath. This was it. There was no turning back. Either he told the truth, or he lost her forever. And of all the bad things he had done, losing Marina would be the one thing he couldn't bear. "Because I'm Gabriel." The silence that followed was deafening. Marina stood motionless, the color draining from her face. For a long moment she said nothing. She just processed those 4 words that changed everything. "What?" Her voice came out as a faint, almost inaudible whisper. "I'm Gabriel, Marina. The man you talked to for months, the social media profile, the messages. It was all me. I created that identity one night when the loneliness was too unbearable. I never intended to actually meet anyone. But then I found you, and for the first time in years I felt something I thought I'd never feel again." Marina shot up from her seat, knocking over the chair. People around them stared, but she didn't care. She felt tears burn her eyes, anger and pain mixing into a storm inside her chest. "You lied. This whole time you lied." "I know. And I have no excuse. I was a coward. I was afraid that if you knew who I really was, you wouldn't want anything to do with me. That you'd only see the money, the last name, the empire. I wanted you to know me for who I really am, without the masks." Marina shook her head, tears now streaming freely down her face. "You didn't give me a choice. You didn't give me the chance to decide if I wanted to know the real you. You manipulated me. You made me fall for 2 versions of you without knowing they were the same person. How do you think that makes me feel?" Henry stood up too, desperation clear in his voice. "Marina, please. I know I was wrong. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. But I need you to know that everything I felt was real. Every conversation, every word, every moment. It wasn't a lie. The only deceit was the name. But my feelings were always true." Marina took a step back, creating distance between them. "And Amanda? Did she know about your lies too? Or did you only start lying after she was gone?" The mention of Amanda was like a knife to Henry's chest. He closed his eyes, the pain of the past mixing with the pain of the present. "Amanda has nothing to do with this." "Yes, she does. You said you lost her, that you never got over it. And now you want me to believe that you truly love me. How can I believe anything you say when everything was built on lies?" Henry had no answer, because she was right. Everything had been built on lies. And now the truth was destroying them both. Marina picked up her cane and started to leave the coffee shop. Henry followed her. "Marina, wait, please. At least let me take you home." "I don't want anything from you, Henry, or Gabriel, or whoever you really are. I just want you to leave me alone." She went out onto the street and hailed a car from her app. Henry stood on the sidewalk watching her go. And for the second time in his life, he felt like he had lost someone he loved. Only this time, the blame was entirely his. In the weeks that followed, Marina completely shut down. She didn't answer messages, didn't take calls, didn't open the door for anyone. She spent her days lying in bed, alternating between crying and an emotional emptiness that seemed endless. She felt stupid. She felt used. She felt like a pawn in a game whose rules she didn't understand. But the worst part was that, despite the anger, despite the pain, despite the betrayal, she still felt something for him. And that made her angrier than anything else. Because how could she love someone who had lied so blatantly? How could she miss someone who had manipulated her feelings? Henry wasn't doing well either. He went back to locking himself in the mansion, refusing meetings, ignoring calls from the company. Mrs. Celia watched with growing concern. One day she couldn't take it anymore and stormed into the office, where he spent his days drinking and lamenting. "You need to stop this." Henry barely looked up. "There's nothing to stop, Mrs. Celia. I've already lost everything." The housekeeper sat in the chair across from his desk, her expression stern. "You haven't lost everything. You made a mistake, a big one, I'll admit, but you still have a chance to fix it." "How? She won't even listen to my voice. She hates me, and she has every right to." Mrs. Celia leaned forward, her voice softer. "She doesn't hate you, Henry. She's hurt. There's a difference. Hate is cold, distant. Hurt is warm, present, and you only get hurt by someone you still care about." Henry finally looked at her, a faint spark of hope in his eyes. "So what do I do?" "You give her time, and when she's ready, you show her you've changed, not with words, with actions. You prove that the man she knew, both as Gabriel and as Henry, was real. Because deep down, it doesn't matter what your name is. It matters who you really are." "But I don't know who I am," Henry confessed, his voice breaking. "I spent so long pretending that I forgot." Mrs. Celia stood up and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then this is the time to find out, not for her, for you." Meanwhile, Marina received an unexpected call. It was from an organization that promoted musical performances for people with disabilities. They had heard about her through a recommendation and wanted to know if she'd be interested in participating in a charity event. She would sing for a small but significant audience. Marina hesitated. She didn't feel ready to expose her voice, her vulnerability, to an audience, but then she thought of her mother's words. Her mother always said that music was the most honest way to exist, that when she sang, Marina was completely herself, without barriers, without fears. She accepted. The event would be at a small theater in downtown Chicago, 2 weeks from then. Marina spent the next few days rehearsing, choosing songs that spoke of pain, of new beginnings, of the courage to keep going even when all seemed lost. Singing was her way of processing what had happened, of turning pain into something beautiful. What Marina didn't know was that Mrs. Celia had been the one to make the recommendation, and that she had told Henry about the event. Not so he would interfere, but so he would have a chance to see her, even from a distance, to understand who she really was when she was being completely authentic. On the night of the event, the theater was packed. Marina waited backstage, her heart racing, her hands sweaty. She had never sung for a real audience. She had never exposed herself like this. But something inside her knew she had to do it. She had to prove to herself that she was more than her hurts, more than her scars. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage with the help of a producer. She sat on the stool, adjusted the microphone, and took a deep breath. The first song would be "Bridge Over Troubled Water" by Simon and Garfunkel. A song about paths, about searching, about the hope of arriving somewhere even when the way is dark. When she began to sing, the theater fell into absolute silence. Her voice, filled with all the pain and all the hope she carried, filled every corner of that space. The audience listened, mesmerized. And at the back of the theater, in one of the last rows, Henry listened with tears streaming down his face. It was the same voice he had heard humming through the halls of the mansion, the same voice he had secretly recorded and listened to on sleepless nights. But now it was different. Now she was singing for the world. She was showing her soul to hundreds of people, and it was the bravest thing he had ever seen anyone do. When Marina finished her last song, the theater erupted in applause. She stood up, gave a shy bow, and left the stage with her heart still racing but lighter than it had been in weeks. She had done it. She had allowed herself to be seen, and the world hadn't fallen apart. Backstage, as she received congratulations from the organization, a producer approached her. "Marina, there's someone who would like to speak with you. He says it's important." Marina felt her stomach churn. She knew who it was before she even heard the voice. Marina. Henry was there, just a few feet away. She could feel his presence, as she always did, as if her body recognized his even without seeing him. "What are you doing here?" "I came to hear you sing. I came to see you being yourself, and it was the most beautiful thing I have ever witnessed." Marina shook her head, the anger returning. "You have no right to be here. You have no right to just show up in my life whenever you want. I know, but I needed to tell you something, and if after this you want me to disappear forever, I'll respect that. I promise." Marina crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "Then say it." Henry took a deep breath, the words coming out with difficulty. "I lied to you, but not about what I felt. Every conversation we had, as Gabriel or as Henry, was real. Every feeling was genuine. I only hid my name because I was scared. Scared that if you knew who I was, you wouldn't give me a chance. And I know that's selfish. I know I should have trusted you. But I was so used to being seen only for what I have, not for who I am, that I forgot there are people capable of seeing beyond that. And you're one of those people. You always were." Marina felt her eyes burn, but she didn't let the tears fall. "And what do you want me to do with that, Henry? Forgive you? Pretend I wasn't manipulated? Accept that it's okay you played with my feelings? I don't want you to pretend anything. I just want a chance to prove I can be better. That I can be the man you deserve, not the billionaire, not the owner of the mansion, just Henry. Just the man who fell in love with you because you made him remember it was still possible to feel." Marina was silent for a long moment. Part of her wanted to scream, to send him away, to cut any ties that still existed. But another part, the part that still held on to all the good moments, all the conversations, all the kisses, wanted to believe, wanted to give him a chance, even knowing she could get hurt again. "I need time," she said finally. "I need space to understand what I really feel, without you around, without pressure, just me and my thoughts." Henry nodded, even though every fiber of his being screamed not to let her go. "As much time as you need. I'll be waiting." Marina left the theater that night with her heart torn between pain and hope, and Henry returned to the mansion knowing he had done all he could. Now, all that was left was to wait and hope that love was stronger than the lies that had nearly destroyed it. The weeks that followed were the quietest of Marina's life. Not an empty silence, but a silence filled with reflection, with questions, with a deep dive into everything she had experienced in recent months. She returned to the routine of looking for jobs, but now there was something different about her, a confidence that hadn't existed before. The performance at the theater had shown her that she was capable of being seen, of being heard, of existing fully. And that changed everything. Henry respected her request for space. He didn't send messages, didn't call, didn't show up. But that didn't mean he had given up, on the contrary. For the first time in his life, he began to work on himself. He sought out a therapist, something he had never considered necessary. He started attending company meetings in person, reconnecting with the world he had abandoned, and every night before going to sleep, he would listen to the recording of Marina's voice singing. It was his way of remembering why he was trying to be better. Mrs. Celia observed the changes with quiet satisfaction. She saw Henry waking up earlier, taking care of his appearance, smiling from time to time. She saw a man who was learning to live again, not for someone else, but for himself. And she hoped that when Marina was ready, there would still be a place for them to try again. A month after the theater event, Marina received an unexpected invitation. The organization that had promoted her performance wanted her to participate in a series of charity shows across the state of Illinois. It would be a small tour, 3 weeks visiting small towns. Marina hesitated at first, but then she realized it was exactly what she needed. Distance, perspective, a chance to discover herself far from everything that tied her to the past. She accepted. The tour began in Peoria, then moved on to Springfield, Rockford, and several other towns. In each place, Marina sang for small but moved audiences. She met people with stories similar to her own, people who had also learned to turn pain into art. And with each performance, she felt more whole, more complete, more in charge of her own story. It was in one of those towns, in a small inn in Galena, that Marina finally gained clarity about her feelings. She was sitting in her room after another performance when she realized she hadn't thought about Henry all day. For the first time in months, she had gone hours without him invading her thoughts. And strangely, that didn't relieve her. It scared her, because she realized that not thinking about him didn't mean she had stopped loving him. It just meant she had learned to exist without him, but existing without someone wasn't the same as not wanting that person in your life. It was just proof that she would be able to survive if things didn't work out, and maybe that's what she needed to know before making any decision. She picked up her phone. She no longer had his number saved. She had deleted it one angry night, but she remembered it by heart. She dialed before she could change her mind. Henry was in a meeting when his phone rang. He saw the unknown number and normally wouldn't have answered, but something made him press the green button. "Hello?" "Hi, it's me." Henry's world stopped. It was her. After weeks of silence, it was her. "Marina," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "How are you?" "I'm okay. Different, but okay. I'm traveling, doing shows, discovering who I am when I'm not trying to figure out who the people around me are." Henry closed his eyes, a sad smile on his face. "I'm happy to hear that. You deserve to discover yourself. You deserve to be happy." There was a long pause. Marina took a deep breath before continuing. "I called because I need to tell you something. Something I figured out during these days away." Henry felt his heart race. "You can tell me." "I spent a long time being angry with you. Angry about the lies, the manipulation, about falling for two versions of you without knowing they were the same person. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized the anger was hiding something else. Fear. Fear of admitting that, despite everything, I still feel something for you. And that scared me because I felt that if I admitted it, I would be weak. I would be accepting being deceived. But then I understood that loving someone who made mistakes doesn't make me weak. It makes me human." Henry felt his eyes burn. He got up from the meeting table and left the room, ignoring the curious glances of the executives. "Marina, you have no idea what those words mean to me." "Wait, I'm not finished. I'm not saying I forgive you completely. I'm not saying everything is okay, because it's not. You hurt me in a way that will take time to heal, but I'm saying I want to try. I want to see if we can build something real from the rubble of what was, but only if you promise me one thing." "Anything." "Promise me you won't lie anymore, no matter how hard the truth is, no matter how much you think a lie will protect me. Promise that from now on, there will only be honesty between us, because I can't love someone I don't trust. And I need to trust you." Henry felt tears stream down his face, something that rarely happened. "I promise, Marina. I promise I will never deceive." "You again?" "I promise I will spend the rest of my life proving that I deserve your trust. I promise I will be the man you saw in me, even when I couldn't see it in myself." Marina felt her own tears fall. "Then when I get back, we'll talk, for real. No masks, no fake profiles, just you and me. And we'll see if we can find a way forward together." "When are you coming back?" "A week from now. The tour ends on Sunday. I'll pick you up at the bus station." Marina smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Okay. See you next week, Henry." "See you next week, Marina." When they hung up, they both stood still for long minutes, processing what had happened. A second chance, an opportunity to start over. It wasn't a guarantee that it would work, but it was a possibility. And sometimes a possibility is all you need. The last week of the tour flew by. Marina sang with more emotion than ever, each song filled with the journey she had lived. And when she finally boarded the bus back to Chicago, she felt a mix of anxiety and hope that stayed with her for the entire trip. Henry spent that week preparing everything. He didn't want to do anything extravagant or ostentatious. He just wanted to show that he had heard what she needed: simplicity, truth, genuine presence. He personally cleaned the room she had used in the mansion, filling it with small details he knew she would appreciate. Audiobooks he had discovered she loved, special teas, a new guitar in case she wanted to learn to play. Mrs. Celia watched it all with a discreet smile. "You're nervous," she commented one afternoon as they prepared dinner together. "Terrified," Henry admitted. "What if she gets here and realizes I'm still the same person who lied? What if it's not enough?" Mrs. Celia placed a hand on his arm. "Henry, you're not the same person. I've seen you change over the last few weeks. I've seen you face your demons, seek help, open up to the world again. That matters. And if Marina doesn't see that, then maybe it wasn't meant to be. But I have a feeling she will, because she always saw you better than you saw yourself." On Sunday, Henry was at the bus station 2 hours before the scheduled arrival time. He paced back and forth, checking his phone every minute. When the bus finally arrived and the doors opened, he felt his heart nearly leap out of his chest. Marina got off with her backpack on and her cane in hand. She had a different air about her, more confident, lighter, as if the trip had lifted a weight she had been carrying on her shoulders. Henry approached slowly. "Marina," she turned toward the voice, a small smile appearing on her face. "Henry." He guided her to the car, helping her with her backpack. During the drive to the mansion, they talked about the tour, the towns she had visited, the people she had met. It was a light, careful conversation, full of meaningful pauses. When they arrived at the mansion, Marina felt the familiarity of the place, the smell, the sounds, the vastness of the spaces. It was strange to be back after being away for so long. Mrs. Celia was waiting for them at the door with a warm smile. "Welcome back, Marina. I've made your favorite tea." Marina felt her eyes burn. This house, these people had become important to her in a way she couldn't fully explain. After tea, Henry took her to the backyard garden. He had prepared a surprise. A small stage was set up with a microphone and a speaker. "What is this?" Marina asked. Henry took a deep breath. "You let me hear you sing from a distance at the theater, but I'd like to hear you up close, just for me. If you want to, of course." Marina felt her heart race. It was a simple request, but it was filled with meaning. He wasn't asking her to perform. He was asking to be let into her world. For real. She stepped onto the small stage and adjusted the microphone. She thought about what song to sing. It had to be something that said what words couldn't. She decided on "Both Sides Now" by Joni Mitchell, a song about time, about the things that remain, about the beauty that exists even in the midst of pain. When she began to sing, Henry closed his eyes and let himself be carried away. Her voice filled the garden, filled the house, filled the empty places inside him that he had learned to accept as permanent. And for the first time, since losing Amanda, he felt that maybe he was capable of loving again, not in the same way, but in a new way, a way that honored the past but wasn't imprisoned by it. When Marina finished, there was silence, and then Henry applauded, slowly, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Marina stepped down from the stage, and Henry met her halfway. They stood there, facing each other, the space between them charged with everything that had been, and everything that could still be. "Marina, I need to tell you something. Something I've never told anyone." She nodded, waiting. "When Amanda left, I died with her, not literally, but in all the ways that matter. I stopped living. I stopped feeling. I locked myself in here and decided it was safer not to risk it again. And then you appeared. First as a voice on a screen, then as a real presence. And you made me remember that there was still life in me. But I was so afraid of losing again that I lied. I hid who I was because I thought it would be safer, but it wasn't. It just made me lose you in an even more painful way. And I learned something from that. I learned that loving with fear isn't really loving. It's just protecting yourself. And I don't want to protect myself anymore. I want to risk it. I want to feel, even if it hurts. Because you taught me that the pain at least proves we're still alive." Marina felt the tears fall. Those were the words she had said to him months ago, through a message when he was still Gabriel. And hearing them back, now from the real, whole, vulnerable Henry, meant everything. I was scared too, she confessed. Scared of not being enough, scared you would just see me as the blind girl who needed help. Scared that when the novelty wore off, you'd realize I wasn't anything special. But then I understood something. It doesn't matter how you see me. It matters how I see myself. And for the first time in my life, I see myself as whole, complete, capable. And if you want to be a part of this life, I want to let you in. For real. No games, no lies. Henry held her face between his hands, just as he had the first time he kissed her. No games, no lies, just the truth, even when it hurts. And he kissed her. It was a different kiss from the others. It didn't have the urgency of desire or the desperation of fear of loss. It had something deeper. It had the promise of trying, of building, of being real. When they pulled away, Marina smiled, a true smile that lit up her entire face. Then let's try, but slowly, one day at a time. One day at a time, Henry agreed. The months that followed were a time of rebuilding. Marina returned to work at the mansion, but now not as a cleaner. Henry insisted she didn't need to work, that he would take care of everything. But Marina refused. She wanted her independence. She wanted to build something that was hers. So she started giving singing lessons to visually impaired children at a non-profit that Henry helped fund. And she discovered that teaching was as rewarding as singing. Henry, for his part, began to change how he ran the company. He started getting more involved in social projects, using his family's fortune to make a real difference. And whenever he made an important decision, he would ask for Marina's opinion. Not because she knew about business, but because she had a way of seeing the world that made him think beyond profit. They fought, of course. There were days when the differences between them seemed too great. Days when Marina felt she didn't belong in that world of luxury. Days when Henry fell back into old habits of trying to solve everything with money. But they always talked. They always came back to each other. They always remembered the promise, truth, even when it hurts. A year after that afternoon in the garden, Henry took Marina to the third-floor room. The room that had belonged to him and Amanda. The room that had been locked for years. He took a deep breath before opening the door. I need to do this. I need to let the past go, not to forget her, but to honor her in the right way, by living. Marina held his hand as they entered. Henry described every object, every photo, every memory, and for the first time since his loss, he spoke about Amanda without pain. He spoke with affection, with gratitude, but also with acceptance. Together they began to pack things up, not to throw away, but to store with respect, to transform that space into something new. Marina suggested it become a music studio, a place where she could teach, where they could hold small performances for children. Henry loved the idea. It took months to renovate the room, but when it was finished, it was perfect. It had soundproofing, musical instruments, a grand piano that Henry had bought especially for Marina to learn to play. And on the wall, a plaque that read, "For Amanda, who taught me how to love. For Marina, who taught me how to live again." Marina cried when Henry read the plaque to her, because she understood that she wasn't competing with a ghost. She was honoring a memory while building something new. The marriage proposal came simply. On an ordinary night after a dinner they had cooked together in the mansion's kitchen. No audience, no grand production, just the two of them, with Mrs. Celia discreetly watching from the doorway. "Marina, I don't have an expensive ring. I haven't prepared an elaborate speech, I just have this." Henry took her hand and placed something in it. It was a simple silver ring with a small stone. "It belonged to my grandmother, the only person in my family who taught me that the value of things isn't in their price, but in what they represent. I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you every day that you choosing me is the best decision I've ever made. Will you marry me?" Marina held the ring, feeling the weight of the question and the lightness of the answer. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The wedding was small, in a simple chapel in the Illinois countryside. Only the people who truly mattered were present. Mrs. Celia, who cried through the entire ceremony, a few of Marina's friends from the non-profit, a few executives from the company whom Henry had learned to see as more than employees. And in the front row, an empty seat with a photo. Amanda, because she was part of this story too. Marina sang during the ceremony. She sang a song she had composed especially for that day. It was about encounters, about second chances, about a love that doesn't need to be seen to be real. And when she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the chapel. Life after the wedding wasn't perfect. They continued to have their challenges, their conflicts, their moments of doubt. But they always returned to their foundation: truth, respect, and the will to try. Always. Marina continued to teach, continued to sing, continued to be the voice that guided blind children to discover their own light. Henry continued to run the company, but now with a purpose that went beyond profit. Together they created a foundation that helped people with disabilities find opportunities for work and artistic expression. And every night before they went to sleep, Henry would hold Marina's hand and say, "Thank you for teaching me how to live again." And she would reply, "Thank you for teaching me that I was always worthy of being loved." Because in the end, that's what they had both learned. That true love doesn't need perfection. It needs honesty. It needs courage. It needs the willingness to see the other not as we wish they were, but as they truly are, with all the flaws, with all the scars, with all the imperfect and beautiful humanity that makes us who we are. And when Marina sang in the studio that was once Henry's room of mourning, he would stop what he was doing and just listen. He would listen to the voice that had saved his life, the voice that had proven that even in the darkest of places, there is still room for light. Because sometimes the person who saves us isn't the one who pulls us out of the darkness. It's the one who teaches us that we can exist within it and still shine. And so, between successes and mistakes, between truths and vulnerabilities, Marina and Henry built a story that didn't have to be perfect to be true. A story that began with lies but transformed into the most honest thing either of them had ever lived. A story where love wasn't a fairy tale, but something much better. It was real. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Marina and Henry has touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of love, forgiveness, and new beginnings, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what marked you the most. Every day we bring intense stories like this one, revealing the deepest side of the human soul. Stories about courage, about second chances, about the beauty of being imperfect and still worthy of love. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode with another narrative that will stir your emotions and make you reflect on the mysteries of the heart.